why your trauma is sabotaging your relationships, your business, and life, and what you can do to actually improve moving forward so it stops playing out and you stop repeating those sabotaging patterns. If you don't know who I am, my name is Lewis Huckstep. I'm a coach and I help people find their true self, their purpose, their values, their mission, their vision, and do the inner work so you can create a life that you love. Now, the reason I speak a lot about relationships and business, I'm passionate about it, so that helps out. But your inner work is revealed and magnified in those areas, in parenting as well, but relationships and business really reveals your unhealed stuff. So I'm going to go super deep with you today, so I hope you enjoy. I'm going to zoom in on certain parts of the conversation. I'm going to share my screen at some point, so if you can watch the video, please watch the video. And I'm going to break it down to why you sabotage your relationship, your life, your business, why those sabotaging patterns are playing out, and again, what you can do to actually move forward. So with that being said, let's rip into it. So I always speak about this with my content when it comes to trauma. So there's 3 pieces to trauma that you want to understand. Number 1, first piece is trauma itself. My definition of trauma is a moment in time where something was too much or not enough. And that something will be a behavior or a character trait. Someone did something or didn't do something that was too much or not enough. It could be abandonment, rejection, abuse, criticism, judgment, neglection, lying, anger, frustration, whatever it may be. You've got to find the word to describe it, because what the ego does, the ego is the identity of who you view yourself and the world to be. All of your beliefs, all of your memories, all of your judgments, all of your biases, that's a part of your ego. Some people think the ego is a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. It's just the identity. Now, you can have limitations and trauma within your ego, and that's the limiting part. That's the part that gets triggered. So, where I'm going with this is whatever you have not healed through, your trauma, it will be triggered. Now, where I was going with that as well, the ego likes to do a couple of things. The ego likes to generalize, it likes to distort, and it likes to delete. And it also likes to make itself right. So it creates a narrative. It likes the big bad story. I hear this all the time with clients and I have to hold them accountable so I can help them move forward. But think of this, maybe a friend, maybe you've done it yourself, where you ask someone who's really upset, they don't like someone, they're holding on to something, they're resentful, they got like this negative shit playing out. And you ask the person, why don't you like that person? Why are you so upset? Why do you not like what's happened? And they will just go la 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 la, and they'll give you this huge, massive fucking story, which is the ego creating the narrative to reinforce itself. Because there's a couple traits to the ego. Number 1, it avoids pain. That's why it deflects and it doesn't want to talk about your stuff that you're insecure about and your trauma and all that stuff. And number 2, it makes itself right. So it reinforces itself. It proves itself to be right, even if it's limiting. That's why it can be so slippery. And this is why the inner work can be quite challenging for people who don't know what they're doing. So the reason I'm telling you the trauma part is you've got to be specific. Healing, transformation work, if you're going to do it properly, you've got to be specific with it. You have to be clear on what is the behavior or trait that was too much or not enough. I did 4 balancing processes. That's my healing process, which I'll talk about later this week, with clients. And the mastery is being able to find the trait or behavior. I'll give you a quick example right now. So you do this with me right now. Think of someone that you don't like. It might be a parent, might be a friend, might be your current partner, might be an ex-partner, might be someone that hurt you in your upbringing. Doesn't matter. Think of someone you don't like. Now, in one word, what's the thing that you dislike most about that person? It will be a character trait or a behavior. They did something or didn't do something that was too much or not enough. Find the word. It might be betrayal, judgment, rejection, criticism, lying, whatever it is. You got to find the word. Once you find that word, it will hit you and you're like, yep, that's the word. I don't like that. That's the trauma. That's the wound. Now, step 2, to keep this conversation going. Step 1 is the trauma. So there's a moment in time where a behavior or a character trait was too much or not enough. Second to this, you create a coping mechanism. Now, there's other words for this. There's coping strategies, there's trauma responses, there's trauma reactions, there's shadows. There's all these things to say the same thing. Essentially, what it is, it's what you do to overcome, protect, and hide the trauma. Okay? So you overcome, protect, and hide the trauma. What can that look like? It can look like dissociation. You get angry, you get anxious, you get fearful, you become a people pleaser, you overwork, you overachieve, you go to the gym. There's many things. You can smoke a cigarette, you can eat food. There's tons of ways. It's what you do to overcome, protect, and hide the trauma. I'll come back to that in a moment. Now, while I'm there, the coping mechanism, that's what is causing the sabotaging patterns. So when people say they've got these sabotaging patterns, what you're saying is you have coping mechanisms from unhealed trauma. That's what you're actually saying. Now, another caveat to this, it could also be limiting beliefs. So your limiting beliefs and your unhealed trauma is what creates your coping mechanisms. So you got to find what it is and then address it, which I'll get to soon. So let's keep moving forward. Trauma, moment in time where a behavior or a character trait was too much or not enough. Number 2, you've got a coping mechanism. What do you do to overcome, protect, and hide the trauma? 3, the third point is a trigger. A trigger is what reminds you of the trauma and it activates your coping mechanisms. You feel activated or triggered into a coping mechanism. This is why I say all the time, nothing triggers you, it reveals what's inside of you. So when you get triggered, when you get activated, and just so you guys know, remember, a trigger doesn't have to be what people call a sympathetic trigger, where you get angry, frustrated, anxious, all those things. It could be a parasympathetic trigger where you might disassociate, you might go numb, you might go still, you might go quiet, you might go to sleep, literally. You might get tired because you want to avoid the situation. Those are the 3 pieces you got to be aware of. Trauma, also limiting beliefs, but we're not talking about limiting beliefs today. We're talking about trauma. You got coping mechanisms or coping strategies, whatever it may be. And then you've got triggers. Triggers remind you of the trauma and it activates the coping mechanism. Now, there's one extra layer that I want to add to this. Trauma has 2 sides to the coping mechanism. One side of the coin is when you get triggered, essentially what I just said, when you perceive something that reminds you of the trauma, it will activate the coping mechanism. You get triggered into it. That's one side to it. The other side to it is you will protect yourself or resist or sabotage yourself to protect yourself from experiencing the trauma again. I'll give you some examples of what this can look like. I'll use rejection or abandonment because most people can relate to that at some level. Let's use rejection just so we can move forward. So trauma, a moment in time, you got rejected and it was painful for you. So that's a wound of yours. You haven't addressed it yet. Your coping mechanism is you get anxious. Okay. So then the trigger, when you feel rejected, when someone rejects you, you will get triggered into anxiety. You'll get anxious. Now, the other side to the coin is you're going to do things to protect yourself from getting rejected again. What could that look like? You might not have a tough conversation. You might not enforce boundaries. You might not leave someone because you might not find someone else again and you go get it rejected again. So you stay in a shitty relationship. You might not say no to a certain client. You might not fire someone. I wasn't going to share the story, but I will now. I had an employee. So I'm a recovering people pleaser. If you guys don't know my story, I'm a very ex-people pleaser because I had abandonment, rejection, inadequacy, criticism, judgment wounds. Those were some of mine that I've done processes on. So my coping mechanism was to be a people pleaser. I didn't want to reject people. I didn't want to hurt people because I was trying to protect myself from my trauma. I literally had an employee that was the wrong fit for the role. The business was losing money. And I was too scared to fire him because I didn't want to reject him and I didn't want to get rejected. So I literally waited. This is what not to do in business, by the way. But I waited until the business literally had like no money left. Like we had like a month's left of revenue to keep the doors open. So I had a real reason to fire him. Not to actually fire him because he wasn't performing, he wasn't the right fit. And he was a good person. Like I'm still friends with him to this day. He was just the wrong fit for the role. But because I was scared of being rejected, I wouldn't have the tough conversation. So that's how it could play out. So 2 sides of the coin of the wound, of the trauma in terms of the coping mechanisms. One side of the coin is you get triggered into the coping mechanism. The other side is you do things that resist you or stop you from experiencing the trauma again. That's why you procrastinate, you hesitate, you make excuses, you have judgment, you hit a glass ceiling, you sabotage. All these sabotaging patterns, this is how it's playing out. If you're sabotaging if you've got sabotaging patterns, you're either getting triggered into those patterns or you're protecting yourself from experiencing the shit you haven't worked on yet. And again, limiting beliefs tie into this too, but we're mainly talking about trauma today. I hope this is making sense so far. So, what do you do about it? So this all makes sense, or hopefully it's making sense. So I'll give you a quick little exercise that you can do. I normally do this with parents. So I'll use parents. You don't have to use parents. You can use partners. You can use anyone. So think of your parents for now. And if you don't want to use your partners, ex-partners, think of someone you don't like. Again, answer the question that I said before. What's the one thing you dislike most about this person? Let's start with dad, hypothetically. Use dad. What's the one thing you dislike most about dad? Use one word to answer it. What's the one thing you wish could change? What's the one thing that triggers you most about this person? And don't feel bad for saying whatever your answers are. It's all good. I love my dad, but I can still answer these questions about him. So it might be anger, frustration, lying, control, manipulation, rejection, abandonment, whatever the word is. Find those words. Then do the same thing for mum. What's the one thing you dislike most about mum? What's the one thing that triggers you most about mum? What's the one thing that you wish could change about mum? Find the word. Use a partner if you need to. Use your current partner or an ex-partner. What's the one thing you dislike most about that person? Find those behaviors. Find those character traits. Because when you find the answer, think about what I'm saying now. Those are things that you've been through that were too much or not enough. You will have coping mechanisms that you will use to avoid getting into the situations where you experience it, and you'll be triggered when you perceive it. You also attract it into your life, especially your relationships. You attract your unhealed trauma and limiting beliefs into your relationships. And then you have all these coping strategies off the back end of it. It gets super deep. I'm not going to go that deep on you guys today, but think of those words and it will start to click if you're answering the questions with me. You'll start to have all these realizations and like, holy shit, I don't like abandonment, so I keep attracting abandonment. I keep getting triggered by abandonment, and I keep repeating those sabotaging patterns because I'm trying to avoid it. I'm trying to protect myself from it. That's the patterns that's sabotaging you. Now, next question, what do you do about it? You've got to do a healing process on the wound. Once you heal the wound or heal the trauma, the triggers and coping mechanisms go away. Sounds simple. It is simple once you fucking do it. One of my gifts, because of my pain around learning and communication and teaching and all that stuff, is I like to make things simple. I was that kid in class, you might have had that person, you might have been this person, where you're in class at school and high school, whatever, and you ask like, why? Can you explain it again? Can you explain it in a different way? I don't understand it. That was me. So I like to make things super simple so it's actionable and you can do something about it. But it is literally as simple as that. I literally did a process. I was at the gym. I was training. I didn't train, but I was at the gym. And one of the clients at the gym that I train at, she knows me. We chat here and there. She watches my content. She knows what I'm into. And she had a really vulnerable conversation with me. She said, hey, can I have a bit of help with something? I said, absolutely. What do you want help with? And she was like, I'm getting triggered. I got this thing going out. And I said, great. What's the trait? I taught her essentially what I taught you guys in this video. I gave her a quick rundown of it. And so find the trait. What was the trait? I'm trying to remember what it was. It was malicious, if I can speak English. Malicious, that was the trait. Her mother was malicious. So we did the balancing process, which is my healing tool, on the trait of malicious. You've got to find the behavior, find the trait, find the wound, find the trauma, do a healing process on the trait or behavior, then the triggers and coping mechanisms will go away. That's the simple answer you're looking for. So how do you do that? Find a coach, a healer, a therapist, someone you feel safe with. These are my criteria that I suggest looking for when you want to do some inner work with someone. Make sure, number one, you feel safe in their presence, because if you don't feel safe to do inner work, it's going to be very challenging because you're not going to be vulnerable. You're not going to put the walls down. Your ego is going to come up. You're going to fight to hold on to your limitations. So find someone who you feel safe to be vulnerable with. Number two, make sure the person you're working with is an embodiment of the work that they teach. I wouldn't listen to an unhealthy personal trainer. And I would hope that you wouldn't either, right? I want to listen to someone who actually walks their talk. So who embodies the work that you want to work on, essentially. Number three is they have results for other people, because it's a different skill set between helping yourself and helping others. Some people are really good at helping themselves, but they're a shit teacher, they're a shit communicator, they're a shit healer, they're a shit coach. Nothing wrong with it. They just don't have that skill set, or they're still learning that skill set, and that's okay. So look for those three things and then just go do the inner work. Go do it. I run like masterclasses for free to help you guys with this. I have paid services of how I do this. I have a book that helps you with this. I have this content that hopefully helps you with it. but learn how to heal, learn how to do a process on those traits and behaviors. And this is my recommendation for you moving forward. Become aware of when you get triggered. I literally did it this morning with the same person. We kind of finished, I did like a mini balancing process with her at the gym. And I said, look, just to finish this conversation, what I would love for you to do, moving forward, when you get triggered, I want you to regulate your nervous system, take a deep breath in, and I want you to ask yourself, what specific behavior or character trait triggered me? If you want to find where you haven't healed yet, just wait till you get triggered. Simple as that. You will attract people and circumstances to reveal where you have not healed. So just become aware of when you get triggered. When you get activated, and again, that might be a parasympathetic activation, but when you get triggered, take a breath, regulate your emotions, do some self-reflection, and ask yourself, what did this person do or not do? What did I perceive that triggered me? Now, another layer to that, though, is what did you think was going to happen that you wanted to protect yourself from? Like if you thought you were going to get rejected, that may trigger you. So you might not have gotten rejected, but you thought you were going to get rejected, so you resisted, you got triggered. Judgment is a common one. So you don't get judged, you don't put your hand up, you don't say yes, you don't speak in front of people, you don't say yes to the opportunity because you're trying to protect yourself from getting judged. The mastery when it comes to doing inner work is finding what the wound is. Once you find the character trait or the behavior, whatever's getting triggered, you just do a process on it. And then the resistance, the trigger, the coping mechanisms, and all the other things that I haven't touched on today, all of it disappears because there's nothing there. I hope that made sense. I'm going to summarize this. Trauma, 3 things. Number 1, trauma, it's a moment in time where a character trait or a behavior was too much or not enough. You got to find what that is. 1-word answers, find what it is. Number 2, you have coping mechanisms. This is what you do to protect, hide, and overcome the trauma. Number 3 is a trigger. A trigger reminds you of the trauma and activates the coping mechanism. The other side to the coin is you'll do things to protect yourself from experiencing the trauma again. So if you're feeling anxious, what are you protecting yourself from? Or what triggered you into the anxiety? It'd be one of those 2 answers. Find what the behavior is. Find the word to answer or describe what triggered you, and then do a healing process on that trait, on that behavior. I took a good friend of mine, I won't say her name, but I took her through a process yesterday, and the trait was selfish. So there was a moment in her life, it was her dad we did the process on, the trait was selfish. We went through the process, her heart opened, she felt so much love and gratitude, and the resistance towards her dad for selfish went away. It dissipated because she integrated and loved and healed this part of her. That's the magic of this work once you do the work. I hope you got value from this. This was quite a deep one. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. I'd love to hear some of your answers. What were some of your answers? What's the trait? What's the thing you dislike about the person? You want to find the behavior. Once you find it, do a healing process on it, because until you do, you'll keep attracting it. You'll keep getting triggered by it, and you'll have all these coping mechanisms that cascade or that run off the back end of this wound, okay? Hope you got value from it. Please share this with a friend. It would really mean a lot. Please subscribe to the channel. If you're interested in working with me, I have tons of options. I've got a book. It's on Amazon. It's on Kindle. It's on Audible. It's called The Inspired Life Method. I run in-person events as of 2025. They're on the Gold Coast. There's links down below as well. And I also have a conscious community. This is where you get 24/7 access to all of my tools, all of my teachings. There's weekly Zoom calls. It's only $49 a month. You can cancel whenever you want. And there's a free 7-day trial that comes along with it, which comes with a one-on-one call with me. Those links are down below. I hope you got value from this. I love and appreciate you. Be aware of what triggers you. It's revealing something within you that you get to heal and work on. Have a great day. Speak to you soon.